I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on December the 5th, 2007. Newcomers look into cuttingthroughthematrix.com, where you can go into various topics on the associations, the fraternities, and the Royal Institutes. They're all connected to create your present and your future. And you can download as much as you want for free. Also look into alanwattsentientsentinel.eu, where you can get transcripts in the tongues of Europe. And we're adding to those transcripts all the time. There's a few more coming in from other nations. You know, just living and being aware, and always being aware, it's not hard to project the future, because most people are wrapped up in the present. And what they think is the present happens to be all the topics that fill their heads, the entertainment that fills their heads, the music, the movies, what they're doing in their lives with those in their immediate vicinity. And they don't really see the big picture as they're actually living through it. They don't see what's coming. And a long time ago, I saw with the war on drugs, the big changes would come in the future, because I know that they created the drugs at the top. The whole culture was created from the top down. And the police forces grew, and I could see the security systems coming into schools until a generation has grown up in many schools by going through security equipment, bypassing it, being searched before they can get into school, lockdowns within schools, security guards inside the schools. And that's training a generation for a future that they'll grow up in, thinking it's all quite not natural and normal, and they'll have nothing to compare it to. When you don't have a time in your life where you haven't had that, then it's all normal to you. And those now who are coming in their 20s, and with their cell phones and all the rest of it, they take everything for granted, thinking that everything that exists is just normal, including being searched at airports and ordered around. You know, at the airports, there's no discussion there as to rights and wrongs or your rights. You don't have any. You're just ordered as to what to do and when to bend over and how far and all the rest of it. And most people comply. And even the older generation that did not have this going through school comply as well. Everyone wants to get along and get to their destination at any cost. And unfortunately, there's no indignancy in them. Most people have no indignancy whatsoever. That's not a new phenomena. In centuries past, in high circles of power, this technique of controlling the masses, the mass person who has no indignancy in them, is well understood. They go to the wall. And that's why Zbigniew Brzezinski, it talked about them. If they don't fight back, they just turn around and eat their dead. That's what he said. We're back with more after the following messages. I'm Alan Watt, and we're cutting through the matrix and talking about the majority of people that have always been the problem. That's why democracy was picked an awful long time ago by the elite. They knew that the masses, but 80-odd% at least, would go and do whatever they're told to do, no matter how pitiful it is for themselves. They will follow orders and do what they're told. And it isn't until they're against the wall that they start really complaining, and then it's too late, because when you're against the wall, that's when you get shot. You see, that's what happens. Or you have unorganized rebels, as they say at the top, because there's no coordination, there's no planning. They never really want to believe that the king or the queen or the government could ever do anything bad to them, even when their senses tell them it's actually happening. And so the elite and the majority become the problem, almost working together to make this system, this totalitarian system, come into being. And that's always been the problem for those that think down through the centuries, and those who don't want to go along the garden path, because there's a big, big drop at the end of it into the void, and we know it's there. And yet, they've trained, as I say, a generation through the school system to be prodded and searched and to walk through past equipment that looks through their clothing, and now the adults are doing the same thing as though it's all quite natural. And there's a whole bunch of television drama shows funded by the Pentagon or the BBC in England to train you into this through drama and fiction that this is all normal. It's normal behavior. But there's nothing normal about it. They never had this during World War II or any other world war before that. They never had this kind of intrusion into everybody's private life. And it's becoming the normal now because people, as I say, are not indignant. And Zbigniew Brzezinski said that in an interview to one of the big magazines, what he thought about the people, would they ever revolt because of all the plans that they had made at the top. And he says, what do I think of the people? He says, well, you can kick them, you can beat them, you can starve them, but do they do anything? He says, no, they just turn around and eat their dead. That was his opinion of the general population. And these are the psychopathic creeps that are up there advising presidents and running all over the planet, having real power, by the way, because that's what Carl Quigley said. He said, these people, these technocrats, as they're called, unelected technocrats, wield the real power, and they're happy to know it, and it keeps them out of the limelight a lot of the time. The politicians, the front men, take the heat. They get the tomatoes thrown at them. They take the heat for what happens, but the technocrats are the big movers and shakers, and they never, as you notice, retire. They never retire. They put in 12 hours per day into their 80s and 90s. So it's quite incredible to live through this your whole life, watching everything happen, knowing that the bulk of the populace around you, including your own parents when you're growing up, don't know. They don't know what's coming down on them. And they've been trained to trust these ones who come out of special wombs up there somewhere above them that are altruistic and just love them and deal with all the big problems while they can play. And that's what advanced socialism really means. It means perpetual childhood for everyone, because experts beyond you, above you, are dealing with all the big problems. You see, that's what it's about, perpetual childhood for the people underneath them. And unfortunately, lots of people like that. They like that. And if you could possibly get the airwaves of the entire planet and give them all the data showing them how this has all happened and where it's going, most of them would vote the same system right back in. Even if you told them it only lasts a few years, they'd vote the same thing right back, because it's all they know. And people who belong to the majority are terrified of taking a risk or terrified of a change. They'll do anything to stay put in their little world and play. They're terrified of change of any kind. And the technology that's dished out, as I keep telling people, was not given for your benefit. The Pentagon had the Internet long before the public were given access to it. It was designed and set up to create a world system of control. World system. Every single country in the planet. And the data on every individual, all the data, will be in that computer. And they've already done a simulation. They have simulated matrix worlds where they have a double of you in that world with all the data which they've already acquired on you in that person. Now they're bringing out the video games where they can monitor your brain and actually map your individual brain to put into that same structure. And one day you'll go to sleep and you'll wake up thinking you're in the real world, but it'll probably be the matrix world you're in. Quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, quite something, isn't it? You know, I've been listening to Alan Watt. Somebody recommended him to me during 2020, and he was a great comfort to me during that time because I suppose maybe a lot of people will identify with this or empathize with it. I felt very much under siege and very isolated and more than just isolated, like that there was a lot of people out there who had gone very, very crazy overnight and or had been given permission to show how crazy they could be. And Alan Watt was a voice of sanity, and he was he was like uh, a reassuring uncle sort of thing, somebody who'd been through it all before, seen it all before. And unfortunately, he left us in 2021, and I've been uploading some of his audio streams, or audio recordings rather. I don't think he actually streamed, just audio recorded during the time up till 2021. But he'd been doing it for many, many years, and I had never heard of him before, I think 2020. As I say, somebody, I think maybe who is in our circles here, who might sort of go from the various channels that seem to be in our little group here, that often communicate with each other. And so, yeah, he was recommended to me, and it was a very good recommendation. If you've never heard of him, I've uploaded some of his videos to Odyssey and Rumble, and I think it's very instructive listening back to the things he was saying during that time, like so like this time 4 years ago, and that lead in there just seems very appropriate. Just talking about like being in a matrix, and his website was called Cutting Through the Matrix, and how most people just don't get it, they don't care, they don't want to get it, and so on and so on. Anyway, without too much further ado, what I'll do is basically start you off with. Oh, sorry, you're not looking at anything there at the moment. I'll put up some nice pictures there. Hopefully, there'll be a nice. What's it called? I was going to say kaleidoscope, not a kaleidoscope. Slideshow of some videos of Delphi, maybe, whatever way you want to pronounce it, in Greece. There's modus operandi, and he says, "Good day, sir." I love how so many people are so polite. Well, good day to you too, sir. Um, okay, I better get into it because this is only meant to be a quick one. But we'll, again, famous last words are like, well, really, that's almost like my catchphrase. This is just going to be a quick one. Then 3 hours later, we're only halfway through. Anyhow, I'm going to start with just what Delphi is in Greece. And it's one of these sort of classical places of, well, it exists as a sort of an ancient town and then a real town near it, I suppose. And let's see, well, one of the pictures there, we'll have it on the map. I'm sure it'll come up in a minute. But I'll just establish where we are, the place, and a little bit about the mythology or the mythos of it. So, Delphi, Greek, Delphi or Delphine, you can see it like with the Greek characters, the delta, the is it epsilon and then lambda and then phi and then oi or omega I. Anyway, it says in legend, previously called Pytho, Pytho, was an ancient sacred precinct and the seat of Pythia, the major oracle who was consulted about important decisions throughout the ancient classical world. So this was it. I mean, there was priestesses, and they were in Delphi here. And if you've ever seen that movie with Tom Cruise in it, oh boy, it's amazing when I go live. And sometimes Minority Report. Sometimes these things are in my head all the time, and they just leave my head. Then Minority Report. So if you remember those kind of, did they actually call them the Delphi or something like that? But they would see the future. They would predict future crimes, or they would get a consensus together among the three. And of course, there's a trinity going on there as well. But I won't focus on the trinity aspect just yet. But, say if you've got any meeting and people discuss things, you have a quorum, which in business speak at least is supposed to be the minimum number of people required to be at this meeting in order for any decisions to be made among them. And the idea is that each one will have an equal say. But I seem to remember in Minority Report that one of the priestesses, or Vestal Virgins, or whatever way they were described, had the most strong visions. Her visions were the most lucid. And but between the three of them, they could agree anyhow. Maybe the other two would just sort of back her up on the most likely course of future events. And then the police would run out and arrest some guy before he even had the chance to commit the crime. So that was a sort of perspective, or a reimagining, or maybe a version of the priestesses at Delphi. There's New Edge Designs. Good to see you there. Now, so I'll get on with just reading a little bit more about this standard article about Delphi, the place in Greece. So the major oracle who was consulted about important decisions throughout the ancient classical world, the ancient Greeks considered the centre of the world to be in Delphi, marked by the stone monument known as the Omphalos of Delphi. And it has in brackets navel. I better just read, because it's an unusual word there. I don't know what omphalos is, but I'm wondering if it's like phallus. It says the omphalos that's Omphalos of Delphi, is an ancient marble monument that was found at the archaeological site of Delphi, Greece. According to the ancient Greek myths regarding the founding of the Delphic oracle, the god Zeus, in his attempt to locate the centre of the earth. Actually, I will read out this a bit. He launched two eagles from the two ends of the world, and the eagles, starting simultaneously and flying at equal speed, crossed their paths above the area of Delphi. And so was the place where Zeus placed the stone. Since then, Delphi has been considered by Greeks to be the centre of the world, omphalos, navel of the earth. Now, I'm going to guess, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that because that's very much like, using two compasses to draw arcs and then find the intersection, and then you found the center point. I'm going to say that you would mark that in a Masonic terms with an obelisk, so which is a phallus. So I'm going to guess that PHALOS is related to PHALUS. And that's not the first time I've heard of Zeus either consecrating a place with an eagle, the adler, or the hawk, or the oh my god, again, why am I forgetting certain words? The kestrel, or the oh boy, you're the big bird of prey anyway. The eagle anyway in the sky. He consecrates places with it and disguises himself as an eagle or a bird of prey, a phoenix, or that kind of thing too, perhaps. I know I think North Syria, or a very southern tip of Turkey, I think, that goes into Syria, is Antioch, or Antioch, however it's supposed to be pronounced. Another holy site. Anyway, won't get distracted, but just there we are anyway. Zeus coming in, consecrating it with a center point. So, according to the Suda, and the Suda, Suda, is a large 10th century Byzantine encyclopedia of the ancient Mediterranean world, formerly attributed to an author called Sudas, or Suidas. And so it's an encyclopedic lexicon. So according to the Suda, Delphi took its name from the Delphine, to the monstrous serpent, that's the Delphine, killed by Apollo at Delphi. The she serpent also known as Dracaena or Dracania. No, sorry, Dracaena. I wonder if that's related to Dracula. I don't know. So it's a female serpent or dragon, sometimes with human-like features. So it could be a bit like a siren on the rock, maybe as well. Anyway, who lived there and was killed by the god Apollo. And in other accounts, the serpent was the male serpent Dracon or Dracon, the python. So maybe that's where it gets its name from. Also, the alternative name Pythia from Python, or Python comes from Pythia. The sacred precinct occupies a delineated region on the southwestern slope of Mount Parnassus. It is now an extensive archaeological site, and since 1938 a part of Parnassus National Park. The precinct is recognised by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, in having had a great influence in the ancient world, as evidenced by the various monuments built there by most of the important ancient Greek city-states, demonstrating their fundamental Hellenic unity. Adjacent to the sacred precinct is a small modern town of the same name. So there's Modus, anyway, and he says, home of the oracles, exactly. Now, I'm going to... There's obviously, look, the article in Wikipedia on Delphi is quite long, and I'm certainly not going to read it all. There's probably a lot of very interesting stuff that I could pause on and pick out. And I know I'm going to... I tell you what, I'll read this part out, right, about the Temple of Apollo. So the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Ancient tradition refers to a succession of mythical temples on the site. The first one built of olive branches from Tempe, Tempe. Then one built of beeswax and wings by bees. And I'm just mentioning that because the symbol of the Mormons in the state of Utah, and the state of Utah has this symbol on its sort of emblem or seal or flag of a beehive, and the sort of branch, I think, are they from Jarod or Japheth? Maybe it's Japheth, something like that, I forget. They're from a slightly different line. They're not from Jacob, but maybe, and you know, I'm not a biblical scholar, or I'm not even a biblical anything. But I have a feeling that, you know, maybe one of the other sons of Rachel and Isaac, or maybe one of the daughters or granddaughters, or sorry, grandsons, or cousins of, or whatever, of Jacob or Esau, might have been called Jared or Japheth, whichever one. Maybe it's Japheth. Basically, they think went on to make the tribe that became the Mormons. They come from the sort of same... That's a different line, but the same kind of mystery school thing. And I just, when I saw that about beeswax and bees, I just thought, okay, maybe there's a connection there to the Temple of Apollo. And when I talk about Jacob, I mean about like the tribe of Israel, and then, you know, saying a few other things, and El, you know. The first archaeologically attested structure was built in the 7th century BC and is attributed in legend to the architects Trophonios and Agamedes. I'll skip on, and there was one other thing. Of course, there's plenty of things, but I thought it might be worth a mention that Lord Byron, the guy who... he was the sort of one of the three, was it, romantic poets who went around Europe spreading syphilis. That's sort of like one of the takes on it, like, you know, one of the modernist takes. That he was a playboy of the, I don't know, whatever, Western world, playboy of the European world and all the antiquities, and you know, like, it would have been, you would have had to have been rich to be able to travel around Europe and write poetry, you know, get inspired by visiting places like Delphi and write poetry about it. But I'll read this bit here. It says, in 1766, almost 1776, but in 1766, so 10 years prior, an English expedition funded by the Society of Dilettanti, and that's from dilettanti is sort of Italian, or dilettante in French. It's a curious word. It is supposed to mean somebody who, well, originally means somebody who takes delight in just the joy of reading about things, discovering things, dipping in and out of subject matters, but not becoming an expert in anything. But as far as I understand it these days, it has a sort of a negative connotation, in that somebody who considers themselves to be credentialed in something will look down on a dilettante and sort of say, oh, he's just a dabbler. He doesn't really know anything. He just has a surface knowledge of something. But anyway, back then probably it did mean people who were very refined and well-to-do gentlemen who took a great interest in the fine arts. So I thought this was curious. The Society of Dilettanti was a British society of noblemen and scholars that sponsored the study of ancient Greek and Roman art and the creation of new work in the style. So this society included the Oxford epigraphist Richard Chandler and the architect Nicholas Revet, and the painter William Pars. Their studies were published in 1769 under the title Ionian Antiquities, followed by a collection of inscriptions and 2 travel books, one about Asia Minor, in other words, Turkey and Syria, and the Levant area there with the Lebanon and a certain other country, and one about Greece. And apart from the antiquities, they also related some vivid descriptions of daily life in Castri. And again, like, that's spelled Kastri. And when I read that, I thought, all right, is that where they were castrating people there? Such as the crude behaviour of the Muslim Albanians. So they wrote kind of like travelogues, and one of the things that struck them was that the Muslim Albanians behaved in a crude manner. These guys who guarded the mountain passes. And my guess is that, and I'll let your imagination go where it wants, but my guess is that these Muslim Albanians in the mountain passes where only goats pass and people who are used to climbing at high altitudes. I'll let your imagination may perhaps wonder, like mine did, as to what exactly the nature of their crude behaviour was. Old Man with a Gold Pan, that's a great name there. I recognise the avatar. He says, Johnny STD, seed of the old world, yeah. And there's just, so I can read, maybe it's wine snob types. It's just, the problem with the YouTube chat is that it puts, the way it puts a heart there or whatever, like for the emotions that you can press, and I don't know how to get rid of that. Or maybe there's an option here to, yes, turn off reactions. That's it. Excellent. I found it now. Turn off reactions and it doesn't block it. Yeah, so wine snob types, exactly, yeah. And the sheep were nervous. Well, there you are. So in the mountains of Greece, where the Muslim Albanians were crude, and the hobnobbing, well-to-do, well-heeled British noblemen were nervous, perhaps. No, the sheep were. Anyway, I'll just read this out to you. In 1895, Edward Dodwell visited Delphi, accompanied by the painter Simone Pomardi. Lord Byron visited in 1809, accompanied by his friend John Cam Hobhouse. Anytime I read something like that as well, I always think a pair of dandies then, and up in the Brokeback Mountains of Greece. But anyway, look, that's not what I'm here to do, to talk about, or to whatever. I really don't know. But anyway, here's 3 lines of a stanza written by Lord Byron. He says, "Yet there I've wandered by the vaulted rill," whatever a rill is. "Yes," he said, "I've sighed o'er Delphi's long deserted shrine, where save that feeble fountain, all is still." And, actually that does get across something to me there, that whoever was in these temples, whatever they were used for, the people are long gone now. It's all down to conjecture and, people who've studied books and, they sort of decide on a narrative of what exactly they claim went on from studying bricks from different angles, and reconstructing columns. Um, and so he says there's a fountain that's moving, but everything else is basically just stone dead and not moving. So that does describe it, but there's a picture on screen there now of a kind of amphitheater looking place. And it does look amazing to me, and I can imagine there might have been some plays perhaps from travelling actors down there, or music. And I tell you what, I used to think that kind of stuff was boring, but I'd prefer that now. I mean, it would be amazing to be in the mountains there. There's some people who really like going to music concerts. I think that would be amazing. Yes, it's Matt. Kiss my ass, tyrants. How you been? Um, well, I'm still as disgruntled. In fact, probably more disgruntled than ever. But I guess I'm trying to put my disgruntled energies into a bit better use. I'm trying to force myself to just say, look, just go online and nothing's going to be perfect, but just talk. Because I think maybe part of life, if you've been paying attention, is that you do learn, pick up a few things along the way, and you start noticing things. Us pattern noticers, and there's a few things that other people just might have not noticed, or maybe you have, but even if you have, it might help to have the same things you've noticed described back to you from a slightly different perspective. And then that can be a bit of corroboration. So that's what I'm trying to do before I go. And I don't know whether that's going to be tomorrow or in 50 years' time. To be honest, I wouldn't want to live another 50 years. But equally, I don't want to, you know, have it all over tomorrow. I would feel that, oh, damn it, I should have done a few more things. But anyway, that's the general idea. Whatever little time I have left, or whatever time I have left, I've been very lazy thus far. And so, part of that, by the way, I'm going to admit this now, just as a quick aside, part of the reason why I haven't done many of the things that I should have done is fear of failure and fear of it not coming out nearly as good. Not just like, not just like making videos, whatever, but with lots of things. Um, there's an inertia, an unwillingness to actually start anything because I'm afraid it won't work out right. But nothing's ever perfect, so you just have to do your best. So I have been, that's a long answer to how I've been. I am actually getting more and more agitated, I suppose. But I've been trying to redirect that energy into fixing things and cleaning things and doing something that's productive. They'd be able to get me some exercise as well, physical exercise, that sort of stuff. And I was nearly going to go to bed and then and then I said, no, look, I'll just do a quick one of these. You know what I mean? So Matt there says, yeah, it's a pretty cool spot it is. There was some more pictures, but I didn't quite have time to scale them down. A lot of them on the Wikipedia page, if you want to go have a look at them yourselves, of course. There's a lot of them in a high resolution, and this stream is going out at 720p, so they don't do them justice. And it really is beautiful. I've never visited Delphi. Who knows? Maybe I will if I live to be an older man. If I can ever retire, or travel again. But anyway, there's Lily. She says, greetings all, pausing in the yard work. Lily's great. Here's me talking about doing some physical exercise. I did a bit of yard work there this evening myself. But she's always at stuff. I'm always very impressed with her work ethic. Matt says, I appreciate what you do, John. Glad you're here. Great conversationalist as well as teacher. Never a dull live or vid. Cheers, man. That's really nice. Okay, I'll get on with it. And that's, I think, probably all I wanted to do to sort of set the scene. Like there is other stuff there. I suppose, look, I'll just say that there was a lot then in the 1800s of people going to Delphi, basically the artsy types, drawing paintings, writing poetry, becoming inspired to write other things, not necessarily poetry, whatever prose that they wrote. It influenced the spirit of romanticism. And I suppose it's not an exaggeration to say like that whatever fine art movements were happening in the great cities, like Paris and I guess London and wherever else, Vienna in Europe, would have been influenced by people visiting this place and then making paintings and writing, as I say, books or plays or poems inspired by this place. Um, and even I suppose I'll just say this then, that there is something written in 2013 called The Oracle of Delphi by M. Lind. And modern artists even are inspired by the Delphic maxims. Maxims are like words to live by, or mottos. Examples of such works are displayed in the sculpture park of the European Cultural Centre of Delphi, and an exhibition is taking place at the Archaeological Museum of Delphi. Okay, I'll move on now, because getting to the point here. So there's a method called the Delphi Method. And I kind of had to set the scene there and talk about the priestesses there. And I think maybe one of them might have been called Athena. So I have a feeling that Athens might have gotten its name from Delphi, but I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. Um, what I'm getting onto now is a method named after Delphi that's to do with this. And I suppose if you saw the amphitheater there, it was circular, or at least mostly circular. You can imagine people sitting around a round table discussing stuff, and it could be business meetings, or it could be world trade meetings, it could be diplomatic meetings, it could be summits, but people like to have summits to decide on things like what they call global trade, global tariffs, peace talks, environmental stuff that they talk about, health stuff. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm only just kind of vaguely brushing up against those things, but they would have these consensus building methods, right, to try and have a structure towards bringing a meeting of people who are perhaps coming from disparate points of view and perspectives, some widely varying, and then also people coming from different backgrounds. I mean, some might be from political classes, some might be from economic or business type backgrounds. Other people might be coming from, say, well, it could be from the arts, teaching, could be from agricultural, medicine, who knows? But it could be all people from different disciplines coming together. And so you have to find some way to fit these people in, kind of method from going from perhaps organized chaos then to some consensus at the end. Just pause there for a second to say, Lily says there's lots of gold in the rivers of Washington State. Wow, okay. Wish the Delphi method, says modus operandi, could be used for gold and silver price speculation. Oh well. And Matt says, oh yeah, he hopes to go to Washington there then to have a look. Gold Creek, Methow Valley. Okay. Right. So I'll just kind of briefly describe, even though it looks like some of you know this method, what the Delphi method is. So it's also known as the Delphi technique, or the estimate talk estimate, or ETE. It's a structured communication technique or method originally developed as a systematic interactive forecasting method that relies on a panel of experts. The Delphi has been widely used for business forecasting and has certain advantages over another structured forecasting approach: prediction markets. Delphi can also be used to help reach expert consensus and develop professional guidelines. It is used for, when I hear that, professional guidelines, what's ringing in my ears is people like flailing their hands and saying, well, we have to follow international best practice. Our hands are tied, International best practice has been established. And of course, we often hear politicians saying, well, we were just following, mistakes were made, but we were just following what was international best practice at the time. We were just following the best advice that we received at the time from our experts. Mistakes were made, let's just move on. And nobody ever says, okay, well, let's say we believe you, that you're simply incompetent, because politicians always want to have us believe that all the mistakes that were made, were mistakes, and that it wasn't malfeasance or deliberate sabotage, and that they want us to believe that they're not to blame, that the book doesn't stop on their desk. The book doesn't. So responsibility doesn't lie with them. Responsibility is with the experts, these faceless and often nameless experts who were not allowed even seek some kind of accountability from, let's call it, because they say, oh, these people are private individuals. We just hire them on a case-by-case basis for their expertise in the subject matter. And we can't be, we're just politicians, so we can't be experts in everything. So that's why we have to bring on these experts, these outside consultants, pay them a consultancy fee, and then act on the best advice that we're given by our experts, so that it's just, it's a great little shell game of making sure that nobody is ultimately responsible for anything. So these people love to have power, but no responsibility. And, as Spider-Man's uncle said, was it his uncle? I think. But anyway, with great power comes responsibility, great responsibility. Not unless really you're a politician or a CEO of a business or a board of directors. They go, no, it wasn't us. It was the shareholders who voted for it or whatever, I always noticed that game of, as it's called in the business, the RACI chart, or ACI, responsible, accountable, who is consulted and who is informed. Well, basically, all the people who are really, making decisions want to be outside of that chart, never responsible, never accountable. Well, they might say, I claim responsibility for deciding this and that and the other, but never accountable. That's the way it goes. I'll read a little bit more, I guess. It is used for, this is the Delphi Method, is used for such purposes in many health-related fields, including clinical, medicine, public health, and research. Okay, so again, mistakes were made, but it's never our fault. And they were mistakes. And we were learning as we went along. Delphi is based on the principle that forecasts or decisions from a structured group of individuals are more accurate than those from unstructured groups. Well, I'm glad I read that as well, because when I was a child, I heard about this idea of the wisdom of the crowd. And as a child, I kind of went, okay, yeah, fair enough. I've heard of other sort of mind-blowing type stuff. Like, say, I'd been at many fairs or, what would you call them? Town hall, not meetings, but town hall bake sales and these kind of things, where there'd be a stall, like a fairground series of stalls or markets where people would, they'd be selling their bric-a-brac or, whatever. Like, I'm not sure if bric-a-brac is an international word. I think it's more UK English. Where they'd be selling, their secondhand stuff, like having a yard sale. But also there'd be, in some communal place, whether it be outside, like a car boot sale, or in a sale of work or a field or in a town hall. There'd be people sometimes just selling donuts, other times people would be selling books, or people would be selling old toys or whatever. But I'd seen these sometimes, there would be, the way there'd be these kind of games, and one of them was, can you guess how many gobstoppers are in this particular jar? Or can you guess how many pennies are in this jar? Can you guess how many whatever are in this? And if you are the person who guesses closest, then you win everything in it. And I remember hearing that, supposing if there was a jar that had grains of sand in it, to make it really extra difficult, that if you got 100 people to guess how many grains of sand, you'd get some ridiculous guesses. But if you added up all the guesses and divided by the number of people who guessed, suppose if there was 100 people, you added up all the guesses and divided by 100, you'd get a pretty accurate guess. But if you asked 1,000 people, you'd refine that, the accuracy of that guess, I guess a factor of 10 more. And if you asked 1,000,000 people, they'd be almost bang on. And I had read many of these kind of things. Like, I think maybe in the same book I had read that statistics are a funny thing. They almost seem to be self-determining. And the example given was that, I think it was sort of saying like things like, say, in 1980, the number of people who were killed in New York City by horses, by a kick from a horse, was seven people. And in 1981 it was 8, and in 1982 it was 6, and in 1983 it was 7 again, and so on and so on. And it was sort of saying like that basically there are, in large enough populations, kind of works the other way, that even for unusual events there are a predictable number of whatever category of events happening. You can predict it. It's a very strange thing. And now that I know that we've been lied to by a lot of things, and there are some grand lies, and then there are many contributing lies that go towards those things, I'm going to say that my experience and a little bit of intuition, because I can't really prove it, is that this notion of the wisdom of the crowd was one of the lies put out there by these people who are very good at lying, to make us then accept then that democracy, the will of the people, is the best way to go. Because even though you look around and the more people you meet, like I think probably Winston Churchill is attributed with having said, but maybe other politicians have said this. I think the quote is along the lines of, the best argument against democracy is a 10-minute conversation, maybe a 1-minute conversation with the average citizen. So, I mean, it does beg the question, how is it that most people, as George Carlin would say, now what did he say? The average person is not very bright, and or something. Oh God, I kind of messed it up. He said, think how dull or unintelligent the average person is, and then think that 50% of the people are less intelligent than that. Something along those lines. So if you keep meeting these people who, aren't aware of anything, don't care to be aware of anything, only care about sports ball, drinking, and whatever base pursuits there are, they're uninformed and they don't have the capacity to understand anything, even if they weren't. How is it that if you gather 300 million of those type of people together, that somehow they're going to arrive at the best possible solutions for the democracy, for the country, for the direction that the country should go in? Well, common sense tells you that that's not going to be the case. And if they do somehow arrive at the correct sort of median idea or direction to go in, well, it's just a fluke. It's just an aberration of statistics. It's getting at the right answer, but from all the wrong reasons. And so I'm going to say that is nonsense. And I think that's one of the big lies, So I'll read a little bit more of this paragraph, and then I'll get on to, I think that this is a big lie, that it's just a method to try and streamline getting all these different people's views and putting it through a function that will then create some order out of chaos or get the best answer. I think the whole thing is a big lie. And then after I read out this paragraph, I'll get on to why I think that I can demonstrate that not only is it a lie, but that they know it's a lie. Modus says there, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Yeah. Who was it that said that? Was that Winston Churchill as well? Even though, look, obviously from what I now know about Winston Churchill, he was a liar and a sneak and a coward and a scurrilous scumbag, basically. But anyway, I won't get distracted with that. It must have been Oscar Wilde, was it, that said a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Anyway, Matt says they're narcissist. They're always the same type. It is always the same type. Getting drunk on power. Exactly. So yeah, I forget, but it sounds a bit like Oscar Wilde, but maybe it's older than him. I think you find oftentimes that sort of a quote is if you look up like quote, what is it, quote investigator, several people said similar things with a lot of the quotes that you look up. But anyway, um, so Delphi is based on the principle, which is in other words, like they try and claim like it's a law, not just an idea, like it's just a natural law. It isn't. I think this is a lie anyway, as I say. So that forecasts or decisions from a structured group of individuals are more accurate than those from unstructured groups. Well, okay, maybe, yeah. I mean, if you try and put things in the structure, you're going to get more sense out of it, I guess. But anyway, the experts answer questionnaires in two or more rounds. Now, already, you might be able to see the guiding hand of the people in the shadows, because whoever writes the questionnaires is basically framing the whole discussion and argument and steering the outcome in a way that they want anyway by posing the questions and having questionnaire. It presupposes, and a lot of people psychologically presume, oh yeah, well, this questionnaire, like the people who, like, they don't even think about it, well, who's setting this questionnaire? But if they do think about it, they think, oh, well, the people who are setting the questionnaire, they must be experts. Everybody is just a person. People are just people. Anyway, after each round, a facilitator or a change agent provides an anonymized, I'll have another go at that, provides an anonymized summary of the experts, plural, forecasts from the previous round, as well as the reasons they provided for their judgments. Now, when I read that originally, I began to think of the ever-decreasing circles and being pooled into a vortex. They know what's at the center of the vortex, and they're whirling everybody up, or maybe making a corral, or putting people inside a pen, and then making a smaller pen to put everybody inside that. And so they know the focal point that they're getting to. Modus says, Tom, that's why the USA exports democracy. Yes. I think, again, I know I'm probably very likely preaching to the choir here. But of course, any Republican now, I think, even the ones that are just, we can vote hard at this time, and even if they cheat extra hard, they won't be able to cheat so much that they can overrule the 110 million votes that Donald will get this time around. I'm quite convinced that Donald Trump will win next time. But that's because it's all part of the plan to swing the pendulum even further one way, and then to, hopefully instigate the left. So to create further and further division. All part of the plan. But to have democracy allows them to do this, to create fracture points. You shouldn't have half the nation always saying, now it's our turn. The other half saying, now it's our turn to get revenge, and so on and so on. And the other half then to be, extremely aggrieved and, well, I suppose all the things that come with it, riotous and angry and spiteful and recalcitrant and obstinate and all these kind of things. That's of course going to destroy a nation. So that's why you need to have one leader. You can't have two people steering a boat. Whether it's a monarch or whether it's a dictator or whatever, as long as it's a benevolent guy who has some kind of kinship with the country, then obviously that's the way to go. But people in America, I think, know that it's not a democracy. They don't want mob rule. They want to have certain basic rules that people agree to live by. And then everyone gets on with their lives. And not spend their whole lives arguing about all these concocted ideas that are deliberately generated for people to waste their lives arguing about. Oh, I won't go on about that. I know I'm preaching to the choir. So Matt there says, yep. I'll take that as, yeah, we know. Anyway, we're we're being wound up into a tighter and tighter ball here with the facilitator. Oh, I'm only just here to help, guy, or a change agent. I mean, did you ever hear anything quite so alchemic as a change agent? Alchemical, Masonic as a change agent. So he provides an anonymized summary. Oh, and by the way, many times in the corporation, we were told, here's an electronic survey we're sending you. It's totally anonymous. And we'd like you to review your boss, and we'd like to review you to review your colleagues and all this sort of stuff. And they lied. Like, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I would have thought, like, many times when I was younger, I would have been so naive. Why would they say it was anonymous if it wasn't? Because they lie. That's all they do. And so I made a point of, especially the people who I knew were real scumbags, I would praise them to the hilt. Because I knew they'd be looking at it kind of going, this is weird. Why is he praising me so much? I thought he hated me. That guy must be up to something, It would wreck their heads that I'd be praising them so over the top praise, like, talking about what a wonderful, inspiring person they were. They've got, I know I'm inspiring, but why is he saying? Why does he think that? Anyway, provides an anonymized summary of the experts' forecasts from the previous round, as well as the reasons they provided for their judgments. Thus, experts are encouraged to revise their earlier answers in light of the replies of other members of their panel. It is believed that during this process, the range of the answers will decrease and the group will converge towards the, and then in quotation marks, correct answer. I'll remind everyone, or maybe if you've never heard of it, let you know that there's such a thing called the Ash conformity test. And I think it's named after a psychologist. I can't remember his first name. A-S-H-E, I think it is. Geez, maybe it's A-S-H. There are some videos on it. I did talk about it before in a live stream. I won't try and call it up now, but just to let you know that basically most people do not have the courage of their convictions. The vast, vast majority of people would like to be spoken for by a group, or be a member of a group, or be a member of an organization, and have that the weight, the psychological and political weight of that organization behind that person, and then they'll feel like, yeah, we're right, because even though they are aware of logical fallacies, they'll say basically, how could we be wrong, seeing as our group believes this, and our group is a worldwide international group. 99% of experts believe that we're right, that sort of way. So the Ash conformity test demonstrates how people are such cowards, mental cowards, and that even if they are presented with the most obvious thing, such as 3 lines and 2 lines are fairly similar in length, and another line is, maybe even 3, 4, 5, could be 10 times as long. And maybe it might even have a few lines drawn around it, or arrows or whatever, They're aware of the concept of optical illusions. So a facilitator of the experiment will basically go around the room saying, candidate 1, which line do you think is longest, A, B, or C? And they'll say A. And you might be like, what? Because A will be one of the shorter lines, the obvious shorter lines. And then candidate 2 will say, I think that's either B or A. I think A. And then a couple more people might go, I think B. And another guy will go, no, definitely A. And he'd be like, what? I thought it was C. Or wait a minute, was that what the question was? Did they ask what was the shortest or the longest? I can't remember. I don't want to look foolish. Just pick an answer. Most of these guys have said A. I'll say A as well. And you'll find people go along with it. I've watched this happen so many times in meetings, in whatever corporation, I'm sure you have too, that all these people then, for whatever reason, and a lot of them just want to get out for lunch anyway. And when I heard, by the way, I spoke previously to people who would tell you about how they would know if they got a certain judge that the judge liked them, or they'd played golf with the judge, or they had gone to law school with the judge's wife, or whatever it might be, and the judge liked them, or they'd just had previous cases tried by the judge, and they got on well with the person, with the judge, and they knew they were likely to win because of that. And I said, but I thought a judge was supposed to be impartial, dispassionate, isn't it? And they were like, ah, yeah, oh no, he is, ah, yeah, yeah. But he wasn't. And also, they would tell me, like, basically what you would sometimes want to do is get the judge, or get your get whatever trial you want to win in the morning, just before lunch. If you figure it's going to be a quick enough case, get it done for, get it scheduled for 11. And if it's only going to take maybe about an hour, have the judge basically be looking at his watch, and he's kind of going, yeah, listen, we'll call it an early lunch, 12 o'clock, and they'll go for a 2 hour lunch. And knowing the psychology of the judge or of the people there, the jurors or whatever, you would think, if I was called for jury duty, oh, you better believe I would take it extremely seriously. Be like 12 Angry Men. But most people do not take it seriously. Some people might remember the OJ trial. Some people not only don't take it seriously, but they have vendettas and absolute biases. If I had any biases about it, I would absolutely throw them outside of my head, but that's not most people. And anyway, what you find is in not just the jury, but the judge himself will be like, yeah, listen, let's just call it this way, right? And he just side with the guy who he likes, who he's had lunch with before. I said, we call it an early lunch. That's the way it goes. So I see that at meetings as well. You can see when the meeting's gone on a bit longer than they thought it was going to be, they go, yeah, listen, we'll listen, stop holding up the rest of the meeting. Why are you being so negative, is what they'd say to me. And they'd insist that there was a consensus now, and we call it lunch, and the decision has been made, I'll pause there for a second. As Tom Twain says, the USA is a broad term, like blaming any nation for the machinations of the mercantile mob. Oh yeah, listen, in case anybody thinks that I'm blaming the USA, I absolutely am not. Many Americans, USA Americans, are still very proud of their nation, or partisan in that way. Like, they might go, yeah, fair enough, we've got our problems, but things are worse in Europe or whatever. And I'm not going to get into a competition as to where things are worse in, but I'm not patriotic in any sense at all. But I'm just not going to waste any time criticizing the country that I'm from, nor the continent. I can't really think of a country that hasn't been majorly messed up, at least in Western Europe, and that isn't reaping that isn't experiencing the result of their own degradation, self-degradation into sin, essentially. It's the way it goes. So everywhere is a mess. America is the light of freedom, but it's pretty much extinguished, all but extinguished. It was the light to the world, to show how things ought to have been done. Our constitution, like I'll say, Ireland is a constitutional republic as well, but it was never written into the constitution that we have free speech nor the right to bear arms. And I think it was because that those two things were considered to go without saying. So unfortunately, we don't have a constitution where we can point to those things and say, you can't make laws banning certain speech because you don't want to offend religious or whatever. And you can't create licenses for weapons and whatever. No, they can, because it's not against the constitution. But if it was in there, they would have just had a referendum and people would have got rid of it. You still have it in the American Constitution, but people aren't willing to fight for it. Most people don't really understand why they have it. They think it's an antiquated thing. They think it's an anachronism from the time of the either Revolutionary or Civil War, and everyone feels that we don't want to go back to those. They think those are barbaric times. They think everybody's sophisticated and civilized now. So most people just don't get it. And as George W. Bush said, basically, it's just a piece of paper. Now, people were shocked at that, but there was truth to what he said. Documents have to be living, breathing documents. And what that means is they have to be on the tip of people's tongues, and they have to be in people's minds constantly. And I'll just say this in case I never get to make a stream about it again. I was reminded of the oral tradition recently, where mythos, not myths necessarily as in just stories that are made up, mythos as in the founding legends upon which nations are built. They're both metaphorical and accounts of history. I've heard many times, I can't really verify it, but anyway, I've heard many times that the oral tradition passed down a more faithful rendition of the stories. In other words, they were more accurate, less errors than if they were actually written down and copies made of those written manuscripts. That there were errors creeped into the written manuscripts or translations. So, it's curious as to why this should be. But then at some point, when these myths were written down, or these stories, like, say, let's now go across to a different part of the world, or a different part of Europe at least anyway, but also in Ireland, like, monks' towers and monasteries were burnt down. So imagine all these books written down laboriously, and with lovely illustrations and writing. And then those stories were written into books. Well, people stopped recounting the stories. So they stopped passing the stories on to their children, thinking, well, I don't need to anymore because they're recorded in books. That changed something about people's memories in their minds. They no longer had the capacity to hold these tomes in their minds. And so these stories stopped being a living, breathing part of their mythos. They became just a book upon which that the book was closed, or the metaphorical chapter was closed. And then when those books were burned, that was the end of them. So they all went up in smoke. And then people can't even go back to find out what a lot of these stories were faithfully, So that's perhaps the importance of, well, of course, every medium when it comes along, like the printing press, but even before that, just the ability to write things down in some kind of semaphore or, glyph form. It's using some kind of symbols. It changed the way the mind works, and of course, computers and live streams and videos changes it now. But it's just something to think about again as another aside. That writing everything down in a book stops it being a living, breathing thing. And writing your Constitution down, I'm not saying that the founding fathers of America shouldn't have done it. I think they should have. But at the same time, it might have given people the impression, well, it's all written down there, and it's anyone can go view it in some glass case, so we don't need to constantly talk about it. That might have been, let's call it, an unintentional side effect of having a written constitution. Anyway, I know that's a bit of a tangent, but it's kind of something that I did want to say in case I never get another chance to say it. Because I don't think it's something that maybe a lot of people might have thought about. And a lot of people might hear that and kind of go, that's stupid. But however, Matt says, or no, what was it? Going back a little bit here. Matt says, the mercantile mob? The Ferengi from Star Trek, exactly. Interesting faces on the Ferengi. Yes. The fact that they have big ears, I think it's just they said, oh, let's exaggerate a different facial feature. It was excellent. And it very clearly is. It's very, I'll say, on the nose metaphor. And I don't know, it's a curious one. I don't hear them complaining about it much, but maybe that's because they don't want to draw attention to it. But not that I watched. I think was it Deep Space Nine that they were in mostly. I don't think I watched too much of that, but it was on TV and I did see it sometimes. And the characters who were the Ferengi, it was very much made clear that their whole life was about the ledger and profit and loss, and will some endeavor be profitable for them. And while the other characters were sympathetic to them, they would roll their eyes and kind of go, oh, this guy again trying to make profit. So it might be amusing while they don't have any real power and they're always slaving over just nickel and diming everybody. But yeah, it made it out not to be a laudable or noble trait, and it wasn't. That's the way everybody should consider it. It to be vulgar, to be always just trying to look into every aspect of human endeavor as whether it could be a profit or loss on some ledger. Of course, you can't take it with you, you know, that sort of way. That's the way people should be higher minded, but you know they've made everybody be incentivized just for that stuff. Tom says there are no nations. Matt says just a smouldering ember drowning in the sludge of corruption, John. Nations or not, that's why I stated humankind. Yeah, nothing is done anonymously nowadays, that's true. Even a consensus is rotten at the core. Well, as I say, I'm just going to give it away now. My I don't want to sound too lofty here, but my thesis, my contention is that this is a lie, that this is not a consensus building method. This is a method that gets people to think that they formed a consensus, but that it was a foregone conclusion. It was one which the hidden hand, the people who wrote the surveys and all this, and facilitated the meeting, and arranged it all, and hosted the symposium, or the, what do they call them? The international summits, or whatever they call them. That the people behind it, they've already reached their decisions, but they want a lot of people to walk away with the impression that they played a part in, voting with their opinions and creating some kind of give and take, some kind of concession, but they got most of what they wanted. These people's egos will allow themselves to believe that, and they'll never figure it out, that they were used, and that if they're asked later, they'll say, oh, no, I was there. I know we discussed this, and we had a bit of back and forth and all this, and we eventually came to the right decision. No, they didn't. They were allowed to believe that they did. And, the people who understand psychology extremely well counted on these people's sense of their own, inflated sense of their own importance, to think that, oh yes, I set world affairs, I make decisions for the world. They didn't. But if any time in the future any blame is to be had, they will take the plaudits for it. They'll take all the adulation, and they love talking to the media and feeling that they're important. So they'll take all that credit. And then later on, if needs be, and likely will be at some point, that will be hung around their neck. As in, the placard saying this guy is at fault. And again, the hidden hand will dispense with these people, and they'll use them as scapegoats. And then, of course, they will cry and they'll say, oh, I was just one of the people who decided, it wasn't my decision entirely. I didn't. We did the best we could at the time. And these people will never be able to figure it out and say, it was those people who already had the foregone conclusion. They just used us as useful idiots. But that's the way it goes. And I think I can prove that now. And I'll just read the rest of this paragraph and then go on to what I consider to be the proof. So finally, the process is stopped after a predefined stopping criterion. For example, the number of rounds, or the achievement of consensus, or the stability of results. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? So whenever the people in the background notice or decide that amongst the sort of chatter they have arrived, they'll come in and go, oh, congratulations, you've reached a consensus. And they'll go, oh, have we? And they'll say, oh, yes, didn't you know that it was 10 rounds? And whatever you left it there, that's your consensus. Or, oh, didn't you know that you might not have realized, because you guys are so intelligent and you often try to go into the minutiae too much, but no, that's fine. We're happy with that. I mean, we'll work out the details from here, but I mean, you guys have pretty much reached an agreement. You can leave. I'm sure you're tired now. Why don't you go back to the hotel and enjoy a week's holidays in us in the spa or whatever, and they know that many of the guys there have brought either their wives or their secret girlfriend or whatever it might be, or whatever, the way. And so they know they can count. They absolutely count on these people's indiscretions. Do you know? I will say that, I did go to a few different places as part of work at one point, and everybody was basically trying to scam their expenses, trying to max it out. Um, and the higher up these people went in the company, like, sort of whatever they were called, like directors, but not on the board of directors, like senior management. When these people would go out drinking and go to, hotel bars and nightclubs and that kind of thing, uh, they really let themselves down. Not just, I mean, even if it wasn't known in whatever city that they were from, whatever company, but it often was. But these people would bring great shame on themselves and the company. But they'd cover it up, like the way like rock stars do. Like, I'll just say this, and I won't get any more specific than this. But there was an incident where a whole floor of a hotel was wrecked in the way that rock musicians used to do. The kind of thing. The way you hear this sort of stuff, like driving Rolls Royces into swimming pools and throwing televisions out windows. And there was one whole floor of a hotel. The whole floor was flooded. And these guys thought it was funny. And but the company paid for it. The company paid for that floor, whatever damages. They just paid for the whole thing to be fixed, and it didn't make the news at all. Just quite amazing. So then these people think that they are big wigs, but they're not. They're eminently dispensable, just like everybody else. But as long as they're useful to the company in whatever way, and oftentimes that's just to help put the spell over other people in the company, just act as, well, I suppose, as leaders, to lead the rest of the people in a certain direction. Then, as long as they're useful, they'll continue to keep them on. So the mean or median scores of the final rounds determine the results. I was watching a video there, and it was by Corey Gil-Schuster. It's called the Ask Project, and he went to Greece. And I'll say this: he said, he asked people the question. He said, "Who do you support more, the Palestinians or the Israelis?" And most people said, "I don't know," or "I support both," or "I don't care." Another woman said, "I just disagree with war." And so those answers were all sort of sitting on the fence. And I'm gonna have to look at this quote so that I don't butcher it. It's I think Jesus might have said this. It's talking about people who refuse to take a position on anything. A lot of people have been trained to think that it's the sort of Reddit mod meme, like, oh, there's right on both sides. They think that they can occupy the middle ground, the exact middle, and then always claim a win. Like, basically the meme was, guys, don't you know that anti-X, as in, like, the position opposite X is just as bad as X. So they'll say things like, guys, like, the liberal will say this, or it's a real navel gazing sort of pseudo intellectual guy will say something along the lines of, guys, those people who riot are bad, but, like, equally those guys who are protesters against the rioters, they're equally bad. Or, guys, MAGA guys are bad, but equally, like, anti-MAGA guys are bad. And et cetera, et cetera. Think about anything, and so I've come to realize that, this again, this idea that wisdom is in the middle, that somewhere in the middle is the truth, that one guy says one thing, another guy says another thing, so both of them must be partially right and by an equal amount. So the truth is exactly half of what one guy says, and exactly, no, one guy could be telling the truth and the other guy could be lying, and that's often the case. Now, of course, there can be a third perspective where you remove all bias from either side, but it's complete folly to say that, oh, we'll just get the dividing line then. It's nonsense. And it does infuriate me when people just sort of say, well, I won't pick a side in any conflict because both people are wrong to be fighting in the first place. Nonsense. Now, I've linked to that video there if you want to go look at it at some point. And after this, I hopefully wrap it up now before too long. And the last guy at least has a much more firm opinion. It's clear he's a bit more informed. Of course, most other people don't want to admit that they really don't know and don't care. And they're not a good enough person to inform themselves of anything. But anyway, this won't necessarily be the King James version, which is a bit more. I always like it. It's just more poetic, that sort of way. So I think it's from Revelation 3:16. So in the Bible, Jesus warns Christians who are lukewarm in their faith, saying, "So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth." Well, that's not the one. That's not the version I was looking for. What I preferred was, "Because you are neither hot nor cold, I spew thee from my mouth." And I'd be the same as well. And maybe if you get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, it's been sitting around for a while. It's not cold, but it's not hot. It's lukewarm. I spew thee from my mouth. And that's my attitude to these eternal fence sitters. And they think that they're so honourable and clever. And of course they're not. They're just dullards, intellectual cowards. And they don't know, they don't care, but they'd like to pretend that they're so virtuous. Just another form of virtue signalling. Now, I'll just finish off. Damn it, I've lost my place here. 1 second. I'll try and get this back up while I just quickly look at comments there. Sorry for the dead air there. Just trying to see. I'll have to scroll back a little bit for the comments. Sorry about this, guys. And any ladies? Like Lily, I presume. Anyway, big ears, no, it's not a nation. So Moda says, even a consensus is rotten at the core. I think I said that. Tom Twain says, big ears reminds me of a type of mushroom. And Dr. Crispy Rothschild there, formerly known as Johnson. And Lily says, I have a stack of mini books of the Constitution, ready to gift one to someone in a discussion. Very, that's a nice way of saying to prove them wrong. I think. Moda says, Lily, I have one on my nightstand, like mine's and all. Some stars are worth more after death. Yes, says Tom. And Matt says, judging by where my taxes go, I'm guessing I support both sides, but not as much as I'm supporting the military-industrial complex. Dr. Crispy's, Moda says, nailed it, old man. Are you talking to me? Maybe. Or maybe, no, sorry, not me. Modus is talking to Matt, old man with a gold pan. Dr. Crispy says, the hurler on the ditch. Exactly. Not many people had a fence to sit on. Oh yeah, 'twas far from fences we were raised. We only had ditches to sit on. We had to sit on a blackthorn tree. You lucky bastard. we had to eat stones for breakfast. Anyway, Lily says, I'm more and more interested in working by barter and cash. I want raw land, very low tax on it, no taxable structures. Modus says, non-player characters are all around us, John. Exactly. Cheers, Modus. Right, I'll get on with it now. Special attention has to be paid to the formulation of the Delphi theses and the definition and selection of the experts in order to avoid methodological weaknesses that severely threaten the validity and reliability of the results. You don't say. But they think if they put it in there, that'll make us assume, oh, no, we're aware that there are flaws in the method, but that's okay because our experts have already thought of that by paying special attention to the formulation of the Delphi theses and the selection of the experts. We selected the finest experts known to man. We traversed the globe, hand-picking the best experts. I'll just read this last bit before moving on. The name Delphi derives from the Oracle of Delphi. Although the authors of the method were unhappy with the oracular connotation of the name, smacking a little of the occult. Yeah, I'm sure they don't like that sort of stuff. The Delphi method assumes that the group judgments are more valid than individual judgments. And that's it. And there's no basis for the assumption, they just assume it. But if they assume it, it must be good. The Delphi method was developed at the beginning of the Cold War to forecast the impact of technology on warfare. In 1944, General Henry H. Arnold ordered the creation of the report of the US Army Corps on the future technological capabilities that might be used by the Army. Different approaches were tried, but the shortcomings of traditional forecasting methods, such as the theoretical approach, quantitative models, or trend extrapolation, quickly became apparent in areas where precise scientific laws have not yet been established. To combat these shortcomings, the Delphi method was developed by Project RAND during the 1950s and 1960s by Olaf Helmer, Norman Dahlke, and Nicholas Rescher, R-E-S-C-H-E-R. It has been used ever since, together with various modifications and reformulations, such as the Imen Delphi procedure. That's IMEN-Delphi. And hovering over the Imen Delphi procedure, I get an entry called David Passig, P-A-S-S-I-G, and it says he is an Israeli futurist. He specializes in technological, social, and educational futures. He is a full professor at the Bar Ilan University in Israel. He heads the graduate program in Information and Communication Technology at the Virtual Reality Laboratory at the Faculty of Education. And in all of this, all we have is experts say. That's it. In this Wikipedia page, there's absolutely nothing that links to anything that says, here is why this method works and the others don't. There's a footnote for how it smacks a little of the occult, that they objected to the name, but nothing to say that this method was better than the others. Now, Project RAND, I'll just say this, right? It is actually after the RAND Corporation. So out of which, of course, so many things came, so much of technology like Xerox came, The RAND Corporation is an American non-profit global policy think tank. You don't say. And of course, it isn't a think tank, it's people. And I think at this stage of the game, you know as well as I do, that if you went looking into seeing who exactly are the people who were associated with it back in the 1950s and who are now, we'd be, up to our necks in Steins and Bergs and Rosens. The RAND Corporation is an American non-profit global policy think tank, research institute, and public sector consulting firm. RAND Corporation engages in research and development, R&D, across multiple fields and industries. Since the 1950s, RAND research has helped inform United States policy decisions on a wide variety of issues, including the space race, the Vietnam War, the US-Soviet nuclear arms confrontation, the creation of the Great Society, social welfare programs, and national health care. So they've had a hand in everything that has got us to where we are now. Isn't it incredible? The RAND Corporation originated as Project RAND from the phrase research and development in the post-war period immediately after World War II. The United States Army Air Forces established Project RAND with the objective of investigating long-range planning of future weapons. The Douglas Aircraft Company was granted a contract to research intercontinental warfare. Project RAND later evolved into the RAND Corporation and expanded its research into civilian fields such as education and international affairs. It was the first think tank to be regularly referred to as a think tank. RAND receives both public and private funding. So we have our, the definition of fascism, public-private funding. But anytime they say this project has been funded by a public-private partnership, then we think, oh, that's great. We're getting the best of government funding and private sector efficiencies. They'll drive efficiencies and know-how. Fantastic. Its funding sources include the US government, private endowments, corporations, universities, charitable foundations, US state and local governments, international organisations, and to a small extent by foreign governments. Amazing, isn't it? So foreign governments, international organizations, and these sort of nebulous, or maybe we can find out who some of them are, but I won't go into it now, charitable foundations and private endowments of influential rich people. All of these people then can influence the policy of the Rand Corporation, which in turn influences, or at least the thinking and think tank thinking of the Rand Corporation in turn influences how the government goes. Amazing, isn't it? So there you have it. I mean, and you don't hear much about the Rand Corporation these days. You might still see a movie or two, like if you're watching an old movie of the guy bashing the gong and it says this movie or this film brought to you by the Rand Corporation. But they were a big corporation who were in the public consciousness, like Xerox. And, like when it talks about the Great Society and the aircraft company McDonnell Douglas and public sector consulting and tech and computers and everything came out of the military, all of that stuff would have informed everything from Microsoft, Google, and everything about DARPA and the internet, as well as Xerox. It's quite amazing. Anyhow, I'll move on from that now to what I think is basically what I'm calling is proof, right? And there was, I think it was just one phrase that tipped me off. I'm going to try and see if I can find the phrase that tipped me off to this thing. But I'll just take a quick pause before I do, just to see if there's any comments there that I've missed out on there. Again, I don't necessarily want to read out every comment that just is people talking amongst themselves a little bit. Yeah, I'll skip that one there from Dr. Crispy, just about what he was talking about. But I'll just say this in regard to your comment there. Yeah, it's vital. If they get rid of cash and keep removing ATMs, the cash machines, cash dispensing machines from to make them basically be very hard to find, then that's going to be pretty much game over. But again, Lily is thinking ahead and about bartering, but still, Moda says oh no, I can't. Well, he's talking about the impending debt and fiat collapse. Crispy says the government taxes and bank charges would bank. And Matt says the Ferengi have their names in all the high places. Gotta get that. Latinum, exactly, yeah. Like platinum. The Ferengi look like... Well, yes, exactly they do, yeah. Stein wine, I'll say. And... Oh, sorry, yes. When I said that was the rank organization. Okay, forget what I said about the bashing of the gong. Take that back. Not Rand, rank organization. But anyway, everything I said about the Rand organization was correct. Okay. Forget the bashing of the gong. Cheers for that correction there, Dr. Crispy. Lily Gazoo says, Nasty Harvey. Matt says, ha, yes, they do, Lily. And Dr. Crispy says, J. Arthur, rank the big gong films. Yeah, sorry about that. I would have edited that out then if I had pre-recorded this. But anyway, listen. Just goes to show that I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Moda says, Doc, bygones, ammo, gold and silver. All right, here's my proof. And I don't know how I selected on this, but it was a key word. And it was about the building of consensus. And maybe I looked, do you know what I think I might have done? I looked into something about and when I say might have done, this was maybe back in 2016, 17, around that time, I think maybe. And I looked into this thing because I was in a lot of meetings and noticing that it didn't matter what I said or really what anybody else said. It became pretty apparent to me that the decisions were already a foregone conclusion, but they needed to have my name and other people's names down on a document somewhere to say that we had decided this, so that if it all went tits up later, that their hands would be clean and I'd be left with the thing hanging around my neck. And as I say, with the racy chart, I figured like, well, I don't really have any power, but I'm having all the responsibility and accountability here. So I looked up something anyway, and the reason I'm saying it was around 2017 is because like it was getting within 5 years for sure of, and I guess I'll say it now that we're this far into the stream, Agenda 21. Now we are now in 2024, but I think that Agenda 21 basically started in 2020 and will have wrapped up by the end of 2024, and then we'll be into another 5-year cycle from 2024, just like Stalin's 5-year plans, and I think, again, people know that at 2030, that's another agenda. Either having completed one 5-year plan, who knows, maybe even starting another. Everything is just iterations, stepstone, stepstone, stepstone. Think of it as the ratchet technique or the Fabian technique, You might go forward 3 steps, but you might have to click back a step. But you can ratchet it in there, and you never really lose any battle. They just continue overall throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, throughout the generations, gradually making progress. But I know we've all talked about this anyway, so that's the agendas. And when I looked up a certain word anyway, and I guess it might have been to do with, the flaws and researching what people were saying about the flaws. I just can't think of the specific excuse me, thing that led me onto it anyway. But if you search now, you probably find it. If you search up Agenda 21 and Delphi. So I'll read out to you what I got from the Brave AI search response. And by the way, like, I have confirmed to my satisfaction that it is borked with a political correct stance, whereby some of it is, I would say, outright wrong, but it's been injected with propaganda. So I mention that because what it says here then, like, is kind of giving the game away here. Like, it would be biased against giving me this information. So the Delphi technique is a method used to manipulate public opinion. Now, manipulate could just mean hold it in your hands and shape it. But we know manipulate has got to do with basically get other people to do what you want, So it's a method used to manipulate public opinion and achieve a predetermined outcome in a process. It was discussed in detail in Lesson 9 at www.agenda21course.com. The technique allows those in control of the process to orchestrate the outcome they desire at the end of the process. Progressives make sure the predetermined outcome is obtained by preventing those citizens from participating in the public process and making them think they are participating while all the decisions have already been made beforehand. Abusing the Delphi method. The Delphi method is often used by organizations to get the answers they want and make citizens think they are participating in the public process while all the decisions have already been made beforehand. This is done by teaching people how to abuse the Delphi method, which is a technique used to achieve consensus. The objective is to get the answers they want and make citizens think they are participating in the public process while all the decisions have already been made beforehand. Now, I know I'm repeating myself here, but this is exactly what was spat out here. And I think this bears repeating over and over until people know that that's all it ever is now. If there's a tool they can abuse to get the outcome they want, they'll abuse it in exactly that way. And they have done. Everyone has. Using the Delphi method to achieve consensus. Again, the Delphi method is used to achieve consensus by never leaving home without knowledge of how the Delphi method is used against citizens by city planners and NGOs, especially if you are heading to a meeting being held by these same folks to decide important decisions about your community. This method is used to decide important decisions about your community, such as the route for a planned bicycle path, without considering the opinions of the citizens. So this is lesson 9 from www.agenda21course.com. Lesson 9 discusses the role of non-governmental organisations, NGOs, and how city planners make dupes of citizens through the Delphi Method, and in doing so undermine our representative government. The NGOs do the heavy lifting required to implement Agenda 21 throughout the globe. Understanding the Delphi Method and how it is used to dupe the citizens and undermine the power of the local government is crucial in this process. In summary, the Delphi technique is a method used to manipulate public opinion and achieve a predetermined outcome in a process. It is often used by organizations to get the answers they want and make citizens think they are participating in the public process, while all the decisions have already been made beforehand. So it's talking about citizens at a town, village, or city level. You can make your own extrapolations there. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you from my own personal experience going to many meetings, and at first, by the way, of course, there is a cachet, right? That you're no longer just a grunt. You are feeling, oh, I've come up in the world. I'm important now. I go to meetings. I even take people listen to me for a while. We go around the table. I say my piece. People might not agree with me. Maybe everybody doesn't agree with me, but at least hopefully it's on record somewhere that I disagreed. I was the one conscientious objector, which I often was. I did get very frustrated that very quickly it seemed to me like the whole system was rigged, right? And that's partially why I went looking for answers. Now, when I found out about this Agenda 21 Delphi abusing technique, as I say, in around 2016, when I started telling some of my colleagues who had been made junior managers about this, and a lot of these guys had come up with me, you know, in the same company. Not that I ever got very high, but you know, I got to be able to talk to most people in this global corporation. Part of my job was to write down the agreed upon prescribed method for doing everything, so that it could be taught in a uniform way to everyone in the company, so that everybody did everything exactly the same way. According to a process for everything. Well, these guys anyway, who I had started out with as just regular grunts who never got to say anything, just told to do whatever, all of a sudden they started getting very tetchy. And a lot of these guys were friends of mine, you see. But you know, it became very clear, and I'd seen it many times. Like in the first global company that I worked in, it was a big American company, and a lot of the guys in it, you know, again, I was young, just out of college, and so we were in our early 20s, and one guy who got promoted to being an assistant team leader one time, he then forevermore sat at the manager's table in the canteen for lunch, would never have lunch with us again, and he said to us, like, guys, you know, wouldn't be seemly for me to be seen with you anymore. So I can't hang around with you anymore. And, you know, it's that really struck me, like, that people are that fickle, and they will be, and they will always choose their career or whatever it might be over whatever friendships they might have made in the trenches, you know, that's already coming up. And so I expected that. And so I was looking out for it, and it absolutely happened. And when I started telling some of my, who I thought were my friends, because, you know, I'd known them for maybe 10 years more, guys, do you know about this Delphi method from Agenda 21? And the first some of them pretended they didn't, and one or two went, You weren't at that meeting. You weren't on that course. How do you know about that? So like they gave the game away, and they basically rang the alarm on me. They reported me for having knowledge of a procedure that was supposed to be, as they call, tented, which means inside the tent, secret. In other words, like information not to be divulged to anyone outside of only people who needed to know about this certain process. So even though I was given the task of making sure that all processes were uniform, or written down, or whatever, or to create processes for things, I wasn't supposed to have found out about this particular process, an overarching process. So so that was one of the many ways that I got myself into uh, trouble, like harmed, very much harmed my career in the corporation. And I still, for quite a while, I'm still quite surprised at how much consternation it caused that I had, through my own research, alighted upon this and figured out that that's what people were using in the corporation. Um, so things got quite hectic immediately after that. So that's it. That's my own personal experience to say, like, I have seen it, and there it is. And if it's ever scrubbed from the internet, I hope I've demonstrated pretty well that what we have seen, especially since 2020, is a culmination of, I guess, the effect of this having been used for wider and wider global decisions. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Because, I like to play as fast and loose as I can, but at the same time, I want these things to stay up. So I never mean to go long, but look, hopefully I don't know how long I've been going. I guess it might be over 2 hours now, but in any case, I'll end the stream now, and I'll just take a last look at the comments there. Tom Twain, I'll go back there. I think I'm missed a bit more there. Box wine and tobacco. Around now. Lily says, I used to work in East Hampton, New York. Wow. Lots of Ferengi there. I laughed when I heard there weren't enough serfs during the, in inverted commas, global thing that happened in 2020. So-called, Moda says, I don't know if I read that. Well, I will anyway. Many African nations, Argentina, soon Brazil, America, coming very close. Carl Gustav says, I've heard for years that fake money always comes with a shorter expiration date. There's Vingel. Good to see you. Good evening to you. Tom Twain says, I think the technique is also called hypnosis. Well, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but I mean, those things would be adjacent, all right. And I'll just say this, like, hypo in Greek means under. Like, hypodermic needle means to go under the skin, or under the outer layer of the skin. So hype, I think, means under, and gnosis is that kind of like, special knowledge. So there would be an element of like psychology, or, enchanting people to do what you want to do through clever use of buzzwords, certainly. And I think that's why they use all that business speak, to get people to kind of go, oh, don't know what's really being said here. Just agree quickly. Nod sagely. Stroke my chin a bit. Act like I, pretend like I know what I'm doing here. And then later on kind of go, yeah, I think we made the right decision there. Yeah, that's why I went with the consensus. I felt we achieved good consensus there. And then off they go to their business lunch. Petrodollar. Tom Twain says, I've seen no end of cycle paths lead to dead ends. Oh, yeah. Always done by these kind of committees who don't cycle bikes, of course. Except, not wherever they've put them down. Or even if they did, they just don't have common sense. Think tanks have tanked the Delphi method. says Modus. Carl Gustav says, so there's May's mind. Howdy, y'all. And salute to you. Ave. Matt says, fake people make for fake friends. I test them and can tell you that you can always count your true friends on one hand. Yeah, I mean, in 2020, and really before that, like people would always say, like, it's great to have a good crisis or a good emergency, or how would you say, you know what I mean? Because you find out in times of trouble who your real friends are. But I've said this already, but it's worth repeating. What if you find out that you don't need any hands to count your friends on? Because it turns out you had no real friends. You just have, and it seems to be the way in life, you just have people whose interests mutually align for a short while through your journey in life. Fellow travelers. They're not with you from beginning to end, but just people who walk part of the journey with you until your paths diverge. And they'll often diverge as soon as, say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Till you actually might need them, and then they're no use in this scarper. Right, but I don't mean to be sounding too cynical or to give you no hope, but unfortunately, look, that's the reality of life. People will let you down when you most need them. So, trying to understand that, and you won't be too disappointed then. Fair weather friends, says Carl Gustav. Well, look, that's about it, guys, then. I don't want to let it go on too long. I really appreciate that I've had some people there listening, and hopefully some people will listening live, and hopefully some people will listen on the playback. Hopefully, that's helped to solidify certain things in your mind. Nosce te ipsum. Oh my god. Why can't I translate that? I've forgotten what ipsum means, and it's one of those very common words. I'll have to look it up. Nosce te ipsum. I'm cheating now by looking it up. Know thyself. Oh boy. Well, that's perfect. Know thyself. To thine own self be true as well, eh? Okay, cheers. I'll end it there. That's a great note to end it on. Thanks a lot again for listening. Cheers.